Welcome everyone to the game between Nodirbek Abdusattorov and Magnus Carlsen in the semi-finals of the FIDE Freestyle Chess World Championship 2026. Magnus Carlsen is playing with the white pieces. Their first two games have ended in draws. This is game number 3 and you can see Nodirbek there in his red jacket coming in. Focused. The arbiter already starts off the clock. Magnus comes in, shakes hands, removes his jacket. Well, let's have a look at the position now. We have a knight here, a rook here, a bishop, another bishop, queen, knight, king, and rook. So the pieces that are on the initial square from normal chess are the bishop and the rook. So we could think about a potential quick castling with the rook moving over to f1. Let's see how this game begins. Magnus with the white pieces. What is his first move going to be? Is not at all easy. He can play d4, c4, e4, maybe even h4 is not such a silly move. And that's the thing about Magnus. He always takes his time for the first move to get into the groove, to not rush into things. And this is something definitely to learn from him. I mean, coming late is perhaps not something that you would like to learn. But if you are late, then how to conduct yourself. And Magnus goes pawn to e4. He just moves his pawn forward and Nodirbek responds back with the symmetrical e5. We have pawn to b4 played. Wow. With the rook protecting the pawn, the bishop coming out and the knight going to b3. And Nodirbek responds with the symmetrical pawn to b5. Knight comes out to b3. The knight is looking at the c5 square and the a5 square here. And we have knight to e6. Magnus comes to the board and now pushes his pawn to c3. Black brings his knight to b6. And Magnus plays in the center with pawn to d4. Takes, and d5 played. You can see that the c5 square is now weakened and the white knight can enter there, but black also has the c4 square for his knight. Pawn comes up to f6, knight to g3, excellent move, preparing short castles. Nodirbek short castles first, and Magnus also moves his king up, brings his rook to f1 and castles there. You have pawn takes pawn, pawn takes on e5. Black has these pawns which are looking dangerous, but white also has his king side majority with the f pawn running down. Knight to f4 and Magnus chops it off. Rook takes f4 and now the knight comes to e2. The idea is to start pushing the pawns forward. Rook goes back to f8 and Magnus pushes his pawn to f4. Nodirbek plays his bishop to f5, attacking the rook on b1. Rook comes to c1, taking control of the c file. And now it's time for the knight to jump in. He goes knight to c4. So black does have his trump cards here, but Magnus's position looks much better. Knight to d4. And now pawn to c6. Just defending these pawns. The bishop comes to c2. And now taking on c2 seems logical. You will see that Magnus is trying his best to unblock his two central pawns. Rook takes c2 and start pushing the pawns. The bishop comes to b6. Excellent move. Pinning the knight here on d4. And now if king h1 is played, then already a5 counterplay. So rook e2. Excellent move. Well, Nodirbek, good or bad, must go a5. it's important. He plays it. Fantastic chess. And now a3. Giving up this pawn and starting the central pawn role is the correct way. But it's too difficult. He takes on a5. And now knight takes a5. Because if knight takes, there's bishop takes d4. You deflect the knight from b3. But he first takes. Knight takes. And now pawn to c5. Waiting for Magnus to press the clock. Pawn to c5. Hits the knight. Now the knight needs to move. So Magnus comes back, knight b3, putting pressure on the c5 pawn. And now rook to c8, defending the pawn there. And f5 played. The pawns are moving. d4 with the idea of d3. He has e6 played. And now queen to e7. Defending the pawn, also stopping the kingside pawns. The knight comes back to d2. And knight e3 is the move here. That seems like giving black the advantage. He pushes d3. Magnus is already shaking his head. He's not happy with where he has reached. The black pawns are much stronger in the center. Rook to f2. And now Nodirbek chops off the knight. He takes. Look at the times on the clock. Nodirbek is also ahead on the clock. Knight takes d2. Rook takes d2. Pawn to c4. And now queen comes up to e4. So that c3, you just chop off the pawn on d3. So first defending the pawn. And Magnus Carlsen now goes king h1. Just putting the king away. And Nodirbek goes ahead with his rook. Rook to d6. f6 is somewhere should be tried. But right now e6 pawn is under pressure if you push f6. And a useful move. Pawn to c3. Rook d8. Defending the pawn on d3. Preparing c3. Rook stops it. g6 played. What a move. And look at Magnus. He's down to 38 seconds. He plays a4. Takes. Queen takes. And now maybe b takes a4 seems like the simpler move. But you can also take rook takes e6. Magnus can now take the pawn on b5. A takes b5. He has two queenside pawns. But the black pawns definitely look stronger. Rook e1 check. Rook takes. Queen takes, king h2 and queen d2 leads to a draw after queen e6. But he blunders. He wanted to play for a win here, Nodirbek. Rook e2. And Magnus goes for a check. King h8. And now take the rook on e2. It's a very important move now. To take the rook. Takes it. If pawn takes here on e2, rook e1 wins the game. Because the e2 pawn is too soft. And queen e2 played. And you will see that Magnus now moves the queen. He attacks the rook. And he sees that these pawns are really, really strong. Also there's queen d4 check. Now he goes queen f6 check. Queen f8. Both players try to gain some time. Check. Rook g8, queen d4. And now there's mate on g2, so you simply go rook g1. And he saves g2. The pawns are not running ahead. c3 is met with queen c3. The a and b pawns look stronger. d2 played, but the pawn is defended. So he plays b6. Magnus is winning now. King g8. And he goes for a check. King f7. b7 played. Excellent chess here by Magnus. Rook g2. If you take here, he wants to queen with a check. But queen d5 is a double attack and a deadly double attack here. King f6 and the Magnus simply takes the queen. Black makes a queen here. But now queen takes queen and b8 queen and Nodirbek resigns there. He's unhappy. He storms away after this. Magnus shaking his head. He knows he was slightly lucky there in that game. But what a game this was by both the players. A big fight and both of them showed world-class chess to win here. Excellent play by Magnus Carlsen and also by Nodirbek Abdusattorov. With this, Magnus takes a 2-1 lead in the match and now needs to just hold the fourth game in order to move to the finals.